you know, they're discretionary, how many rear lots you can have. The lot's already there. I live there.
Yes.
So why not let me use the front lot that's there? I've owned this for 20 years. Maybe I want to give it to my son or something. I want to build the house for myself. Exactly. That's what I want to do. And I'm putting in that fire tank that's going to cost me a lot of money, that in the event there's ever a fire, everyone else is going to benefit from that. Now, could you imagine if there was a fire across the street tomorrow and they don't have enough water up here?
Okay.
I'm doing this at my expense. But in these other you have the ability to pass this,
Yep.
these discretionary ratio of rear lots and how many rear lots.
Okay.
You have to do that.
Jonathan.
Okay, so with that being said, are there any more questions for the applicant? If not,
I do.
Yep.
Tony, I have a question.
go ahead.
On our site walk, the existing dwelling up front, you told us that to build your house in the back, you had to abandon it and you could use it for only storage, correct?
What if you look at the administrative zoning permit, and I have it, I don't know if you have it, it says either remove the facilities, meaning like the commode and the sinks and whatever. I remove those because I occasionally restore an antique car and I used it for storage. So like when I disassemble a car, I put the parts in there. And most of it's gone because during the bad heavy snow of 13, I think it was, we had a couple of feet and then it rained in it. The whole front of it collapsed. So most of it's gone. It was 12 by 66. I don't know what it is. It's less than half now. There's just the back bedroom and one other small where the furnace was.
If I might, Mr. Chairman,
Mm-hmm.
Stan, the answer to your question is yes.
All right.
Yeah, so anyways, it wasn't required. I did what they asked me to do. They actually were charging me for multiple dwellings on the property.
Okay.
During one of the legal, yeah, they were charging me. They were charging me as if there was 2 dwellings on the property.
Okay.
And then they conveniently removed it one time when we were in litigation because they heard that and said, oh, that doesn't look good for us. And then next thing, the assessor called me up. Oh, guess what, Ron? We're taking the assessment off the place.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, hearing none. Looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
You actually do have a motion in a second. You just need to vote.
I know, I want to go back through it. All right, so
Okay.
I believe Mike,
Yeah,
Was there-
I'd like one. Could I say one last thing? I would like Mr. Kastner. He has animosity towards me. I would like him not to be able to vote.
okay, you've asked him, it's up to him whether he recuses himself.
I'm going to stay on for the whole
Yep, you can stay right till the end of the meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Tony, I think I was the one who had to vote and I didn't. I asked a question.
I know.
So, okay. So I don't know if you want to go
Since we
through
had a
everything.
million more things at it. So looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Thanks, Mike. Looking for a second. Was that
Second.
Jonathan, second. Alan,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and Marion.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to item B, text amendment for zoning regulations, section 7B11 accessory apartments, applicant Deep River Planning and Zoning Commission. John, I'll leave that to you to buzz back through this.
Okay, so this is basically because of Public Act 2129. The state is putting its thumb on the scale of how accessory apartments ought to be regulated. And it basically should comply with the way in which single-family residences are regulated in single-family residence zones. So basically, as of right and compliant with things like setbacks and height and building coverage, but otherwise as of right. There are a couple of things about minimum and maximum square feet and percentage of floor area of principal dwelling. But this is essentially a regulation that would bring the town's zoning in compliance with the state statute. As we've discussed in previous meetings, there is an opt-out path. But I think we discussed again at previous meetings that this would be the preferable path to go, and we have to decide one way or the other, opt out or change regs in this calendar year.
Okay.
So,
And open this up to the public, and then we'll come back to the commission. Does anybody from the public have questions? Want to speak in favor, against, just in general? All right, anybody from the public? Questions, comments, in favor, against? One more time. Anybody from the public have any questions, comments, for, against? All right, hearing none. Anybody from the commission?
I do. It's more cluster.
You just muted yourself.
Yeah, I know. I unmuted, hopefully. A question, and this is to John, and I'm not familiar with the state statute. So I think our previous regulation required that the owner remain in the main structure. And this one doesn't say anything about that. So I'm assuming that that means that the owner doesn't have to remain in the primary.
that's correct. And in fact, the state statute is silent on owner occupancy. But I've received in another town I work for, the town of Hampton, when they were asking this exact same question, an opinion from our attorney, that because the intent of the state statute is that accessory apartments be treated in an identical manner with single family residences. You don't currently have a regulation that requires someone to live in a house that they own. So you should not, extend that ownership occupancy requirement to an accessory apartment. So that's why we've left that out.
Doesn't that not create the opportunity for larger hospitality places, or, we're opening up an avenue for someone to come in and have different uses for it if an owner does not have to live at the residence?
Well, the use would be people living and sleeping, and eating and doing other things you do in a residence.
Like an
Which is-
Airbnb.
Oh, right, but so that's a separate regulation. And people can rent out their existing single family residence to someone for a year or a month or 6 months currently. And so the idea is to treat the accessory apartment regulatorily identically to a single family residence.
So you could inevitably have a 3-bedroom house turn into a 5-bedroom house.
You could do that anyway.
Right.
If you had a 3-bedroom house and you wanted to do an expansion, add a couple of bedrooms, you pull a building permit.
Wasn't the intent of this to increase the ability for parents to take care of, children to take care of their parents? And it seems like we're just circumventing a building application to make a house bigger.
No, well, so there would be a separate dwelling. It would not be connected. That do not require a door to connect those from the inside. So it's not just an addition, it's a separate dwelling, whether attached or detached.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that part of this, it does, I think an underlying intent of this, it does create a different type of housing type, the type of accessory housing that would allow for family members or potentially an additional caregiver to live on the same property. Not necessarily of the same family, but it is again, a apartment type use that otherwise might not be available, but it certainly does enable the in-family caregiver. I think that's one of the primary reasons, but there are other opportunities here.
You don't see it, Alan, becoming multiple rental incomes for people?
It potentially
be.
could, but we don't see anything that's wrong with that per se.
Okay.
And in a similar way, someone could buy a large number of single family residences and rent them out as income properties.
But we're talking about the potential in a residential neighborhood, say on Essex Street or River Road, where someone wants to generate additional income and conforms with this zoning requirement, and now can put up rental space.
Yeah, and again, to be clear, any single family residence would get one accessory apartment. It's not converting a single family residence to 8 dwellings or to a bed and breakfast, for instance.
Right.
It is, you get one.
Okay.
And again, this is something that if we don't have our regulation, the state regulation is something we would have to go back and opt out of, which is a little looser than this one. All right, so anybody else from the commission?
I just want to ask a question, probably to you, John. Does this have any implication on availability of affordable housing?
And we'll talk about this a little bit later in the agenda, hopefully soon, but we, the answer is yes and no. For the most part, accessory apartments will probably not count towards this town's 830G, affordable housing appeals list, unless someone chooses proactively or the town incentivizes someone to actually restrict the rent on their accessory apartment to someone making lower income. So someone could voluntarily restrict it, but unless they do, it would not, count towards the town's, bottom line. But if you're talking about, more housing opportunities at the lower end of the income spectrum, absolutely, this will do that.
Okay. And that's exactly what I was asking. It seems to create that opportunity. It doesn't necessarily meet a requirement, but it does create a housing type that I think would be desirable in Deep River. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, it's not looking.
Wait,
Yep.
Tony, can the public ask a question or not now?
No, yeah, before we close the public hearing, you can.
Okay, so on this, my question is, I'm just
Just
reading.
state your name.
Oh, sorry, Christine Nucci.
You. Go ahead.
Okay, so on this, I'm just reading, so this has to either be attached to the home. It cannot be a separate 400 square foot detached garage apartment above, or,
No, it can be attached or detached.
Correct.
oh, it can, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, it also gets away from the regulation that the house has to be in existence for so many years before
Right.
it can even apply.
Right.
So someone theoretically knowing that their parents or their college-age children might want to live with them, and they could build a house with this in mind now, whereas they couldn't in our current regulations.
Correct, yeah, they'd have to wait the additional time or come back to commission. Yeah, we've actually done that a couple times, so. All right, any other questions?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Yeah.
In regard to that past comment about the regulations changing potentially from a structure that had been on the tax record, say, for 10 years. And the prior comment from Alan about, generating properties that offer additional housing types. In my time in Newtown prior to this as zoning enforcement officer, we recently changed the regulations in a similar fashion, in almost the same way, where there was regulations that required that a structure be on the tax record for X number of years. And I ran into a number of instances where, somebody had an elderly family member or something that had fallen ill, and they wanted to put them up in an accessory apartment in their house, and this prevented them from doing that. So just a point, a specific anecdotal scenario for consideration.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, looking for a motion to close the public
So
I'll
moved.
make the motion to close.
hearing. All right, looks like Marion beat you to that one, Stan. Looking for a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Stan. Mike,
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yep.
And Ellen,
Yes.
ready? On item C, text amendment to subdivision regulations, section 5 8, open space, applicant Deep River Planning and Zoning Commission. And we kind of talked about this when we were accepting this. This is just to add the use for fee in lieu of open space. I believe Marion had the recommendation to add that a little stronger language. That it was commission it would be commission based under their guise, instead of just going, hey, we don't want to do open space, we want to come in with this. So it would be under our say whether or not if you could do fee in lieu of. With that being said, anybody have any questions, comments? Anybody from the public? Okay, one more time. Anybody from the public have questions, comments? All right. Anybody from the public, questions, comments? If not, commission members?
Motion to accept.
Right?
Before the motion, can we have a little discussion?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. This is Ronald Frisley. I was muted. I didn't know this. I'd like to ask something about the open space. Could you explain that a little bit better? Because I actually offered my rear building rectangle as open space. I don't know if John ever mentioned that to you, and I'd like to know exactly what were we talking about in reference to this open space?
Okay,
Whether
so
we should have it or not, or what was the deal on it?
all right, so let's say, I'll give an example. Let's say my house downtown. I'm surrounded by single family homes and I want to subdivide. I have enough land to do so. Giving a strip of open space that's 25 feet wide and 50 feet long does nothing for the betterment of the town. So I could come to the commission and state, look, I can give you this piece of property. The land trust doesn't want it. It's basically useless. Would you accept, we have to go through the process. You'd have an assessment of the land, what it's worth, and, you base your fee on that. The commission would agree that, $5,000 is fair. And I would put that into a fund in the town.
Oh, okay, you were gonna purchase it from somebody just to keep more open space. Okay. Yeah, just to reiterate, I offered mine, and this came up in one of the other applications.
Yeah, but this
That's
is,
the,
I hate to cut you off, but that, we're past your application. This is different.
Okay, yeah, no, it just came into mind when you mentioned the open space, because I had mentioned it before, but it was never brought to anybody's attention about this,
Okay. Anybody else?
Added my notice.
Anybody else from the public? Commission?
Tony, question on this in regard to when the offer is made of fee in lieu of property.
Mhm.
If an applicant comes in and they don't have sufficient property to offer in the first place, it's not just a matter of the commission saying, well, that property is not beneficial.
Mhm.
If it's not feasible to offer the property, are we creating the opportunity to say that they don't need to have that land available to be offered, that they can make a fee in lieu of, even if the property isn't available? And is it, and I guess that goes to the question of if the applicant doesn't want to offer the property, but the town would like that property because it's beneficial, can the applicant say, I'm not going to offer the property, I'm going to offer a fee only? I just want to get clarification
So,
who's in a driver's seat on this one.
so that was the same recommendation that Marion had, was that we, when we accepted this, was that this would be commission, at the commission's discretion.
And that's the way the statute authorizes it.
Yep. And to back up a hair, let's say somebody came in with a 5-lot subdivision and they said, we don't have enough property to give you open space. Well, then it's not a valid subdivision. So you'd have to give up one of your lots. So with that, anybody else?
What is the percentage of the open space that's required?
It depends on the zone, but most towns are 10%.
It
But-
varies from zone to zone?
Yep.
It varies from zone to zone?
Yes.
I don't know about that. I don't. think I-
Tony, can you scroll up on that? Does it say? It may not. Yeah. Yeah, 10%. The commission shall be guided by, but not limited to, a standard of 10%.
Right, and I
With
think
a
if you
minimum
do,
reservation of 1 acre.
I was gonna say, I think if you do like a planned residential development,
But
it's,
yeah, or a conservation subdivision, there's a larger percentage.
so the minimum is 10. All right, any other questions? If not, looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Go ahead and make the motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Alan. Looking for a second.
Second,
I'm sorry, who is that? I didn't see.
Mike.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Jonathan,
Yep.
Dan,
Yes.
and Marion.
Yes.
All right. Acceptance of applications. I didn't see anything on there. John, do we have anything new?
No, we have an application to receive, I believe, later in the agenda, don't we? Is it
There's
10
nothing
number?
else that came in today or
No.
number 5, audience of citizens. Citizens can address the commission on items that are not on the agenda. So if you have anything you want to ask us about, speak now or forever hold your peace. I got Frederick. Somebody raised their hand. Let's see. I asked you to unmute Frederick's iPad.
Hi there.
Hey,
I got a question and it relates to a question Ron Larson asked at a selectmen's meeting. John Guskowski could probably answer it best.
Hmm?
Sometime back, Ron Larson asked at a selectmen's meeting about the waste transfer facility at Flatwood Park, because it appears as though that they've been bringing in municipal waste. At the time that the Tinarellos were first before the zoning board for approval of that facility, it was supposed to be for demolition waste. And now it appeared, and to my recollection, they were never approved for municipal waste. There's been some various comments back and forth. Their state permit allows them municipal waste, but I don't believe that our zoning approval was for that purpose. And that was the way I remember the zoning meeting when that all went through, because I was there at that time. I don't know if John if Ron was able to reach out to John Guskowski about that or not, but that was what Angus had suggested, was that he contact him. So in lieu of that, I'm contacting John right now to find out if there's any history on that he's looked at in regards to that, because I know from a landlord in the industrial park that he's having a rat problem. And this summer, for the first time, I saw rats in my property on West Elm Street. And I've lived here for over 35 years and never seen a rat till this year. So something has changed. And I believe if they're bringing in municipal waste from out of town, this could well be related.
all right.
All right, so we're working on this. We're continuing to do some research. Conversations that I've had with the property or the managers. Yeah, I believe it's Eastern Transfer. So it's 400 Commercial Drive. All of the representations verbally and in writing, in email to me, indicate that they believe that they're operating within their existing DEP and local permits. I've received a number of questions. I don't know if I've talked to Mr. Larson specifically, but I've received a number of questions about that and about the types of waste they're taking in. And I do note that I was able to track down DEP permits for construction debris as well as paper and cardboard. I did not find a food waste one, but I have a call into the DEP to find out if they've extended any kind of permitting along those lines. So this is an active investigation, and we're trying to run to ground what they're up to and whether they've got DEP license to do that. But I believe you're correct in your recollection that The approvals for the special permit back about 15 years ago were a little bit vague, but did not explicitly include food waste or household waste. So, you know, the answer is we're working on it. It's a known issue and a known investigation, and we're getting to the bottom of it.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
keep us posted, please.
Right.
Anybody else from the audience? This is for stuff that's not on the agenda for this evening. All right. Hearing nothing else, on to item 6, approval of minutes, January 20th, 2022, regular meeting. I'm assuming you guys all had a chance to read this.
Tony, I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Alan. Go for a second.
Second, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Jonathan? Still there?
I'll abstain because I wasn't here.
Thank you. Dan?
Yes.
Yeah, Marion.
Yes.
You? All right, on to new business. Looking for action on the subdivision application, 1-lot subdivision on 164 Cedar Lake Road, map 16, lot 2A, applicant Ron Frisley. Before we have the discussion here, anybody from the commission have anything else they want to talk about or on this one? All right.
The chairman,
Yep.
I think to avoid the possibility of taint,
Yep.
I will recuse myself from these deliberations.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay. So I'm after having read the attorney's letter, you know, and gone through this a few times, and the applicant has stated that there hasn't been no change from the previously denied application. I think based on the commission's attorney's review, I don't think we can approve this application as submitted due to no substantial change has occurred to the plans. So looking for a motion from you guys.
I will make the motion to deny, although I also have a comment. So I don't know how you want to handle that.
Okay, I'll get to a second for that and then we'll discuss.
I will second that motion, Tony.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, discussion?
I was going to say, in a way, it's funny because I did not really approach this as a rear lot.
Mhm.
But to me, it seemed like such a convoluted lot that bothered me more than anything.
Yeah.
And I think if the front lot were close to 2 acres, then I might have, I don't know, it just doesn't. So it just seems so convoluted.
Yeah.
So if I could comment as well, I mean, I think the issue here is black and white in that by creating a front lot, we are creating a rear lot. And by definition, we're not allowed to do that. So as much as I can appreciate the fact that there's kind of an existing condition, we do not have existing separate lots. This is an application for a subdivision, and the subdivision creates a nonconformity. And so without a compelling reason, it sets a very bad precedent that we can waive waive our regulations. And the point that I would contest is it's not just discretionary. It's not a subjective decision. There's got to be an objective, compelling reason for this. I'm sensitive to the use of property and the fact that the property has a lot of the requirements to accommodate additional use on it. But I think that that's not through a subdivision, but through some other use such as an accessory apartment, which we've talked about earlier, is that you can get the value from your property. But I think it's a very dangerous precedent to begin to ignore the, the black and white requirements of our regulations. So, and that's the reason that I would, I'm not in favor of this subdivision. I don't care what shape a lot is. If it meets requirements, it meets requirements. And unfortunately, this one doesn't meet that very specific requirement of rear lots and nested lots. That's all I got to say.
Any more discussion on the motion? All right. So I think, Marion, you made the motion. Alan, you seconded. Jonathan is out. Mike, you vote in favor of denying. Hate to word it that way.
Can I abstain from this? I'm just not familiar enough with what's going on, to be honest with you.
Okay. Stan?
I'm gonna deny it.
Okay. And I will vote to deny also. All right, moving on to text amendment to zoning regulations, section 7B11, accessory apartments, applicant Deep River Planning and Zoning Commission. Let's see here. It's back in front of us. Looking for a motion.
Go ahead, make the motion to approve.
Thank you. And I'll look for a
Was that me or
second.
was that Marion?
Marion?
That's all right. I don't care.
Yes.
I can second whatever.
Perfect. Discussion? All right.
I personally think it's a good regulation. I think it's better than the one we have for some of the reasons people stated before.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that it gives a little bit more options to people without being adverse to single-family residential zones.
I think there's a lot of benefit to this in one aging type within Deep River. I think that it creates an opportunity that our aging residents have an opportunity to stay in town. With an accessory apartment, I think it gives an opportunity for people to realize additional value from their real estate as well. I think that there's benefit across a lot of different areas. I think there's to me, this is one of the best amendment or changes to our regulations I think I've seen in a while.
I agree. All right.
Yeah. I don't think that's a good idea.
Dan, was that you? I think you cut out.
I didn't say anything, no.
No, it was Mr. Prisley who was unmuted.
Yes,
Okay, any more discussion on the motion? All right, I think we got,
in respect to the accessory apartments, please.
this is the public hearing portion is closed. Looking for, Alan, you made the motion. Marion, you seconded. Mike?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Aye.
And Stan?
Yes.
Righty. Item C, text amendment to subdivision regulations, section 5.8, open space applicant, Deep River Planning and Zoning Commission, and looking for a motion on this one.
I'll make the motion, Stan.
Thank you, Stan. Looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion? All right. Hearing none. Jonathan? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
I seconded it, Tony.
Oh, you did. All right, sorry. Jonathan
Aye.
and Alan
Yes.
and Marion.
Approved. Again, for just a reason, because it gives us more options and it seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Great. All righty. On to D, site plan application. General commercial retail use with a caregiver dwelling unit, 68 Main Street, applicant Elizabeth Himmelman. And is a representative here?
We're both here. I'm John Himmelman, Elizabeth Himmelman.
You guys want to give us a little background? Tell us what you're after?
Yeah, you're looking at the first floor, which would be a pottery gallery on, can you see my, no, you can't see my cursor. Or can you?
Yeah.
Pottery gallery, you could see the upper left, and on the right is the studio where the work would be made. Our daughter is a photographer and she wanted to use the far right for a photography studio. This was the former
Riverwind Antique Store. It's right next to the Senior Citizen Housing and Piano Works on that corner at Spring Street. So the first floor would be all studio space.
Can you see?
Yeah, there we go. Yep.
Okay.
And we're looking to put a caretaker apartment on the second floor.
which we have that laid out as well.
All right.
And the only real changes we would do is we'd put a kitchenette in the corner.
And well, aside from all the electric and plumbing and
And new heating system and foundation work and
yeah, it's an 1860 house. So
I guess my only question is, are there any outside changes being done?
no.
Because yeah, it has to, any outside changes, I believe, have to go to design review.
Well, I believe this is in the general commercial, which is not one of the village districts that would require design review.
I'm sorry, you are correct. All right.
So yeah, both the conversions, both the reuse of the lower level as commercial retail and the caretaker apartment are approvable by a site plan, which is why they're here.
Okay, fantastic. Looks like you guys are overdoing it in the required parking. Questions from the commission?
John, this is kind of an interesting application because it's on the, it bounds a village district, and it's bounds a village district that is, I think really it was largely created to encourage this exact type of mix of use. But in the, and correct me if I'm wrong, but within the current zone that it's in, the general commercial, and just clarify that this is a exception from what is explicitly permitted in general commercial, correct? And that's what requires the site plan review. So,
Well, and yeah, in terms of having the caretaker apartment.
right. So I guess where I'm coming from is one, I think I'd be very much in favor of this because I think it meets the intent, especially when you have a zone that's split by a street. You almost want to have the same zoning requirements across a street. It's a street isn't really a bound that separates and distinguishes uses. You want it almost on both sides of the street. So I think it's exactly what we want to see. But I think there's also there's a technical requirement that we need to meet, which is since this is a site plan application, is an actual site plan. I know we have a diagram that indicates a parking area and the potential for expansion of a parking area. It identifies abutters which have different uses. I think what we need is an actual site plan which does verify that what the parking requirement is, indicates where the curb cuts are. If the parking is going to be expanded, is it truly viable to say that that parking can be expanded? I see square footages, but it doesn't demonstrate or prove that it's viable. If we have those other uses, you know, what is the parking requirement? Again, down in this area, I think that there's a our regulations are written in such a way that we stipulate a maximum parking requirement, not a minimum. So if we are in fact looking at a use that's going to require additional parking and change the complexion of the area, we just want to understand that and understand the implications on the abutters by indicating the actual property lines, curb cuts, if there's dumpsters, that type of thing. So while I'm very much in favor of this application, I think that the application is deficient in the technical submission.
In looking at your regs, isn't it something like 1 or 2 spots per a certain amount of feet? And I believe this far exceeds what your regulations ask for. And this was a business that, I mean, that has a parking area. I mean, it's existing for what was an existing business up until what, a year ago?
I think it's been abandoned for 3 years.
Yeah, so
So it was a commercial, like it had the amount of parking spaces needed for a commercial
of that size.
of that size.
So Alan, if I might, would you be satisfied with their submission essentially of a compliance table that would indicate what their existing parking is relative to the regulations?
Compliance table.
Right, that would indicate, what zone it is, what the uses are, what the required parking is, and what the proposed
Right,
parking.
clarifying the
is.
existing conditions.
Right.
Right. And, and again, clarification, I mean, is this, requesting expansion of the parking? I mean, that's what I read, is that it
No,
has the ability to, if that's part of the request, I think that needs to be considered in context to the neighbors. So,
no,
John,
that-
yes, I think a compliance table would probably, if we had supplemental information to clarify, I think that would suffice.
That could
Okay,
be
I
a
just
con-
want to
could be a
also point
condition.
out, in the actual application somewhere, I think it asked about the parking, and I think I have the what your regs are and what we're providing. It's in the written part of the application that we're not looking at now.
Mhm.
I don't know if you saw that. There's a,
Yep.
but not there, no, in the Q&A thing, I think there's a section that asks about the parking. And I looked up your regs and I made note of it in the application somewhere.
Give me one second. I'm getting there.
No, but, and I don't, is it,
Parking spaces are required, 2 parking spaces provided, 6.
there you go.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Right.
And that's based on your numbers,
Okay.
the square feet of the business and how many cars for that
Square
size.
footage.
So John, in a site plan application, what are the requirements of the site plan to be submitted?
I think probably I'll have to check the specifics, but it would be, a map of proposed and existing and proposed conditions. And again, they're not proposing to change the site at all. So I think, their diagram of parking with a compliance table is probably, sufficient to understand the use relative to the site.
Can you go back to the picture before? Maybe that would help clarifying
This one or,
the site, yeah, the actual
The photo?
photograph. Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, hold on. You share. That one?
Yes, well, you can't see the parking.
Hmm.
We'll
The
get there.
parking is,
It
Oh,
is.
wait a minute.
We're getting there.
okay, there we are.
Actually, can you go down the side road? Look at that. All righty.
So the driveway, I think, goes to the back. It might be like a walkout basement.
It
I
is.
only
Yes.
know because I walk by the place a lot, or I was.
Yeah, It is. It's a
before the
walkout
snow.
basement. So the driveway that you're seeing is part of the property. That's the extra parking. That would be probably for the caretaker apartment. And public parking would be the gravel area right in front of you.
Quick question. I know you'll be running the kiln because you have to run that sometimes 24 hours for projects, correct?
Correct.
So can you just explain sound that someone might hear outside if that kiln's running and venting? Quiet?
It's very quiet. It's like, it's just a fan, a very simple fan, and it's the size of a dryer vent. It's practically unnoticeable.
Okay, cool. I'm
It's
really
not, it's
excited.
less noisy than an air conditioner.
I'm really excited for your project. I think it's a great addition to town.
I'm so excited about this too. I taught at John Winthrop for 10 years as the art teacher, and I've been at Haddam Killingworth the last 20 years. And it's kind of nice getting back to my roots. And I think Deep River is a really fun, energetic town with, the new restaurants and stuff. And I'm really looking forward to this project if we can get it to work.
Just one other quick question. Any issues with wastewater on the molding side of this project?
No, you put sink traps in to pick up any of the silt from the clay. So I'm extremely careful about that because again, I'm an art teacher, teaching it. I'm full-time ceramics at the high school. So I'm very aware of any kind of silt that would come off of the clay. You put different sink traps in that'll collect any of the silt. So it's not going into the septic system. Again, that's one of the things I'm looking at.
Are you on septic or sewer there?
They're on sewers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sewers.
But we
Sewers,
have,
yeah.
we have the studio here in our home. We're in Killingworth, where we do have a septic system. So we have to be very careful and we've had no
Okay.
trouble.
Thank you for that answer, both those answers.
So just to appease me, since this is site plan application and we've got very specific requirements to be included on our site plan application, I just want to note that we don't have that, but we have the ability to waive or provide a partial waiver for the site plan requirements. And I think we need to do that, recognizing that, based on a discussion, the proposed use is not going to alter traffic patterns or patterns of use in town, et cetera. But I think we need to go through that hoop first of waiving the requirements. I don't want to set the precedent of ignoring our own requirements, but understanding the nature of this application. I don't know if I can make a motion to waive the requirements of the site plan with the understanding that the use is consistent with existing adjacent uses and does not pose a change to traffic patterns or use patterns with the abutters.
Can I add that? I wanted to piggyback on that. Also that construction is within an existing building. I think that's a huge part of not needing a site plan. If they were changing stuff outside and adding, that kind of stuff, we definitely need a site plan. But I agree with you, Alan. I think we need to waive that.
So that sounded like a motion, Mr. Chairman.
I think Alan started it. I was just piggyback. So
I'll accept whatever amendment you made to my motion.
fantastic. Looking for a second to our motion.
Second to the motion to the amendment.
Thank you. Jonathan? Still there?
I'm still here, but I'm far too involved in this to
Right.
take any part in it.
I forgot you're recused. I apologize. Alan?
That's okay.
You made the motion, Dan?
Maybe.
Yes.
And Marion.
Yes.
All right. So that was just to waive everything.
Right.
All right. So are we, any more discussion? If not, looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Stan. Marion, you were going to say something or?
I was gonna say, yes,
Okay.
so.
All right.
Again, the fact that this is a commercial building, there was a commercial operation in there, so it's not really changing anything. It's been for sale and it seems in keeping with the area.
Gotcha. All right. And Alan, you're the last one.
Yes.
All righty. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item E, affordable housing plan presentation. Take it away.
So, Tony, I ask you to stop sharing your screen, and we'll ask our
There you go.
consultant friends who are hopefully still awake and among us to share their screen. And actually then ask Angus to help us kick things off. And Liz, are you going to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on one moment.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Good. Thank you for sharing that screen. It takes my face off of that big screen. Hey, everyone, I want to thank you very much. My big thing right now is to thank the River Cog for the efforts that they've put in preparing this regional housing plan. And those efforts really make it pretty easy for our towns to use that template to address the mandate from 830J and to address the housing concerns that our state legislature has decided are important. I think tonight's meeting really is going to focus on reviewing the population demographics, maybe reviewing existing housing conditions, and then a possible discussion of current zoning and other regulations that exist and how they might affect housing development in our town and how that might bring us into compliance with this mandate of 830J. I don't have much more to say about that other than that we're going to have to come up with something relatively soon. And we're going to work towards that. But the work that our River Cog has put in and that our zoning enforcement officer has put in is really going to help us get to that relatively easily. So with that, I'm going to leave it back to you guys. I'll give it back to John, to Elizabeth, and let you guys go.
So I don't know. Megan, do you want to say a couple of words before we plow in? Or Sam?
I don't know that I could say it any better than Angus did, but I will if Sam has anything to add.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. Just wanted to say hello and just say that we were very happy that we were able to fund this project for the town of Deep River and for the other 11 towns that are participating in this portion of the project, which is the creation of 830J plans for 12 of our towns. SLR and Tyche will go into the details about the creation of the plan, as well as River Cog's project manager, Megan Juflis. But we're excited to be able to assist with this, and we see this as an important step in the ongoing discussion about affordable housing and how we can find solutions that fit our towns and our region. So with that, I think do I turn over to Megan or do I turn over to Liz or to John?
John.
I think to
All right,
me.
go ahead, take it away, John.
Okay, thanks, Sam. And again, thanks to River Cog. Megan is here. I think Margot from River Cog is also here, as well as some of our consulting team. So I'm doing the presentation this evening actually as an adjunct to River Cog and the SLR team, despite my relationship with the town, and perhaps because of my relationship with the town. But so we'll try to move through this efficiently. So the agenda tonight is again to explain what a regional housing plan is and relative to the affordable housing plans, what it means for Deep River. Then, as Angus said, we're going to sort of take a look at existing conditions, both housing conditions, population demographics, and what the current policies of the town say relative to housing development. We'll take a look at housing needs going forward, particularly for those that making less than the median income. And then we're going to do a little bit of live polling. So if you're on your computers, we're going to ask you in a little bit to open up a new window, or if you have your smartphone handy, we'll do some of that to kind of get a little feedback of some steps that the town might take towards its affordable housing goals. So your role as participants tonight is to hopefully stay awake, and I'll try to moderate my tone enough to keep people alert and engaged. But to learn about what affordable housing is, what it isn't, and why it's important to the town. Certainly be ready to ask questions. I think we'll probably try to save questions towards the end of the presentation. Or if you want during the presentation, go ahead and type them into the chat box, which you have a little button on at the bottom of your screen. And then to participate in the live polling, so we can get some feedback on town opinions of different techniques. So the regional housing plan, which is being undertaken by RiverCog and participated by all the towns, is sort of a follow-up to the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development, which was adopted last year. Thanks, Liz. It does take a region-wide analysis, looking at the region as a market in terms of its jobs, in terms of its housing, takes a look at what the regional housing needs will be and how towns can contribute to meeting those needs. But then, as Sam said, 12 of those 17 towns in the COG are participating in the 8-30J plans, which is a statutory requirement that needs to be completed by June of this year to come up with local solutions for increasing the amount of affordable housing in each town. And so this discussion is sort of a kickoff to that 830J local housing, affordable housing plan discussion. So 830J was a law that was passed in 2017, so just under 5 years ago now, where all communities are required every 5 years to create or update an affordable housing plan. And the requirements of that statute are very broad and very vague. And so there's no numerical target, there's no percentage target, there's no, you have to create this type of housing or that type of housing. It just says the town shall come up with ways to increase the amount of affordable housing in that town. And so it's a very locally specific and locally led process, which is what we're going to be working on going forward. And so, as I said, there's a great opportunity to not necessarily follow any particular state model, because there really isn't a state model at this point. It's an opportunity to take a look at what Deep River's needs are and what solutions would work for Deep River. Okay, so when we talk about what affordable housing, what exactly are we talking about? Well, that is basically housing that is affordable to people at a level in which they are spending 30% or less of their total household income. Because if you're spending more than 30%, you are most likely taking away from other items such as education or food or medication or transportation or discretionary things. And so the goal is to provide sufficient housing so people aren't burdened by spending more than 30%. Under 830G, which is the state's Affordable Housing Appeals Act, there is a specific definition where each town should have 10% or more of properties that are deed restricted or income limited to individuals or households making less than 80% of the state or area median income, and that's AMI. And we'll talk about that in a couple of points in the rest of the presentation. And East Hampton, I know there that really should say Deep River. I apologize for not fixing that. But the data is the same. The family of four making less than 70,900, or an individual making just under 60,000 would qualify as low income, because that is 80% of the area median income for either an individual or a household. And then that translates, if you divide that by you divide or multiply that times 30%, and then divide it by 12, your household budget for housing should be you should be able to find opportunities for under $1,500 for an individual or $1,773 for a family of 4. And that's sort of the benchmark for finding housing opportunities in Deep River. So the region did a community survey back in September and October, and 89 residents in Deep River participated. So it's a relatively small sample size. We'll go through some of these numbers in a second, but again, it's a small sample size, and it was largely people who own their own homes generally were the ones that participated. 92% of participants, about an equal number were people with children and empty nesters. Older participants tended to answer the survey more than young, so 68% were 55 and older, versus the fact that in Deep River currently only 33% of the town is seniors. And more than half of the participants were higher income, made over 100,000 in household income. So these are the respondents. Now let's take a look at what the Deep River residents said. This is a little bit more, sorry. So a number of them did say, a majority said that they are familiar with households who would benefit from more affordable housing in the community. But nearly half thought they knew someone who is currently struggling with housing costs. And nearly a quarter of those folks individually were struggling with housing costs. Folks were generally looking to stay in their current home and had been in their home for a while. And significant majorities agreed that Connecticut is too expensive, the region is too expensive, and then about half believe that Deep River is too expensive. However, when we asked about Deep River in general and affordable housing, 2/3 affirmatively said that housing is an important part of a community's longevity. And more than half believed that the current housing stock was not sufficient to meet current residents' needs and were not adequate to satisfy current needs. And if you combine the inadequate votes for each of those plus the uncertain, you have substantial majorities of folks who were either uncertain or believe that there is not sufficient housing opportunities for now or in the future in Deep River. In specific, people believe that there were not enough housing for young adults, for low-income households, for seniors, and for people living alone. And in most of those cases, I believe you could choose more than one of those. I think maybe people could choose 3 options for the top choices. Liz, is that right?
They could choose all of them. So it was
okay.
either does Deep River have not enough, the right amount, or too much.
Okay. Thank you.
So the green is not enough, blue is the right amount, and yellow is too much.
All right. So thank you for the clarification, Liz. And so particularly the ones for young adults and low-income households, the significant majorities believe that there was not enough housing choices for those types, and the rest were more split. And so when people were asked about the benefits of housing diversity, a number of folks that did say that it would have a positive impact. So about half of the respondents said that increasing housing diversity would have a positive impact, as compared with only 24% that said it would be negative. The benefits pointed out were increased diversity, wider housing options for lower income families, for workforce volunteers, families with children, and allowed younger people and young families to stay in town. So people did see a number of significant benefits of increased housing options. Okay, so that was the survey. Let's take a little bit of look at what the current policies are in town. And so we've been a lot of talking about zoning this evening, so it's an appropriate extension to that discussion. Is that the town, except for largely the core area made up of Main Street and the Village, is largely residentially zoned. Low and moderate density. There are Village residential and Village mixed use. Currently, Village mixed use, which is a very small area geographically, is the only zone in town where you currently are allowed to develop new multifamily. In all other residential zones, you can have 2 families, or thanks to the vote this evening, you can now have accessory apartments in all those residential zones. But if you're looking to do more than a single family, 2 family, or accessory apartment, basically the village mixed use area is your only option. And there are some areas in town that do have development restrictions. We have a preservation and recreation zone. Obviously, the Connecticut River Gateway Conservation District has some restrictions in terms of developability. Obviously, we're on the Connecticut River, and a lot of that shoreline has special flood hazard areas and is subject to the Connecticut Coastal Management Act. The town does benefit greatly from having public sewer and water infrastructure, but that is a relatively limited area geographically, the center of town and along Main Street. And the rest of the town development is basically limited by capacities of the soils and to handle things on private well and septic systems. So the plan of conservation and development, which we are starting at in planning and zoning to look at updating, does have some mention of encouraging affordable housing. But generally speaking, there is a balance that the plan of conservation and development looks for, encouraging open space and plan conservation development. There are some statements in the POCD about encouraging upgrading of existing rental housing, but not a lot of policies in there currently for encouraging new housing for broader swaths of the population other than for the aging population. So speaking of the aging population, let's take a look at the demographic trends. A note on the data when we get into it, not all the census data other than raw population numbers are available. So most of the data that we're using comes from Department of Housing and the US Census's American Community Survey, which is a 5-year sliding window of data analysis from the 2015 to 2019. So there are a couple of years that are not captured in this information simply because the data is not available yet. So data trends and projections. Deep River appears to be, by current data projections, about at peak population. The town has risen to about 4,600 people in the 2020 and 2000 and 2010 censuses. As of 2020, that number came down a little bit to about 4,400. And according to the Connecticut State Data Center, we will see, all things being equal and no significant changes seen, that population numbers intended to, seems like it is directed towards dropping off over the next 20 years. And the age distribution over the last 20 years or so has seen growth in some interesting areas. You've seen some decline in some seniors between the 50 to 54 and 65 to 69, and some growth in young families. But there is a significant drop in the 15 to 24-year-old age range, which indicates that the town is losing its young adult population, and which may have its roots back in the inability of young people to find housing, sort of their first new house or post-college apartment in town. And the population, the senior population, is growing, even though we've lost some population in individual 5-year cohorts. The overall population of age 65 is significantly growing and will continue to grow as a percentage of the overall population. In terms of household distribution, the Deep River does compare pretty well with Middlesex County and Connecticut as a whole, in which about half of its families are married couple families. About a quarter are householders living alone, and then the rest is some other type of family. And household distributions are generally. Oh, take a break. Was that you, Megan? Am I speaking too fast?
Sorry, no, that's me. That's for me to
Okay.
stand up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about
Not
that.
a bad idea. Feel free. So the household size distribution are primarily 1 and 2 family households, with smaller populations being basically family, about 35% or 3 or more persons in the household. So a couple of the takeaways from that, again, that population, again, all things being equal, may have peaked unless we see an influx of new development and new housing opportunities. Population is likely to be on a decline over the next 2 decades. It's going to be aging, the growing share of people 65 and older, and a significant majority of the households are small. So you have fewer people living in the same number of houses is a recipe for population decline. But now let's take a look at those households. So Deep River, again, similar to much of Middlesex County, is largely owner occupied, about 75%, 76% owner occupied. The remaining quarter is owner occupied or is renter occupied. And the distribution of housing units is largely single family detached. In Deep River, it's nearly 3/4, which is a little bit higher than Middlesex County, although the mighty power of Middletown tends to warp Middlesex County numbers. And then the largest other population is basically 2 families. Single family and 2 family basically making up 85% of the town's housing stock. And in terms of that housing stock, the great majority is 3 bedrooms or more. If you combine 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms, you're over 65% or 64%, and which is slightly higher than Middlesex County or the state of Connecticut overall. So there tends to be houses that are generally suitable for families, but again, family sizes are shrinking in Deep River. In terms of value, Deep River tends to be, I think, comparable with most with the Middlesex County in general, where you have basically a quarter of your houses worth less than $300,000, another quarter worth between 3 and 4, and then smaller percentages worth a little bit more than that. But basically, more than half of the homes in Deep River are valued under $400,000. And that's in terms of ownership. In terms of rent, and again, the Deep River doesn't have a large gross number of rental, about, again, 25% of its housing stock, which is already a relatively low number. The majority of them are between $1,000 and $1,500 a month, with another 16% less than $1,000. So you combine those two, over 80% of housing units are valued at under $1,500 a month, but the median gross rent is just slightly higher than Middlesex County or Connecticut in general. In terms of development activity, housing permits has been quiet. There was a tiny peak in 2020, but since then, basically since 2004, we've averaged probably less than 4 new houses constructed in Deep River a year. And there had been some increase in activity seen through COVID, but it wasn't a lot of new house building. It was tended to be more expansions and renovations and things like that. But it's been for many years now a very quiet place in terms of new housing starts. However, the housing turnover has continued to be relatively brisk, where you have between 50 and 80 houses turning over every year, for the last 7, 8, 9 years. Again, there may have been some COVID, increase a little bit, although 2018, 2019 were certainly just as strong in terms of housing turnover as the last couple of years. But so that it's houses are turning over. They're just not, new houses just aren't getting built. And in terms of sale prices, it's been a bit of a roller coaster that tracks kind of some of the cyclical stuff that we saw housing values crash in the 2007, 2008, 2009 area, and kind of bump along for the last decade or so. and with the last couple of years seeing some climbing. And again, that's sort of pre-COVID, maybe entering, sort of a new bubble. And rental prices really or I'm sorry, condos haven't really seen that same significant change. So to recap that again, Deep River, like much of Middlesex County, is largely single-family owner-occupied. The housing market in terms of new development is very quiet. And I think a lot of that turnover reflects that downsizers are seeking housing outside of Deep River, because you have a majority of your housing is 3, 4, 5 bedrooms. And when in a situation where you have an aging population that are 1 and 2 person households, you have a mismatch there where people are living in much more house than they need and are looking to downsize. And a lot of times those are taking them outside of Deep River. So those are the population and housing statistics. Now let's take a look at the housing needs. In terms of, this is an analysis of existing families in Deep River. And so if we look at population relative to the area median income, we split up into categories of low income, very low income, and extremely low income. But basically, these are households making between 30 and 80% of the area median income. So basically, lower median than lower income than the median. We have nearly 700 households, which is over a third of the total number of households in Deep River, who meet the definition of low income. And about half of those are own homeowners and half are renters. So there's a significant population of relatively low income folks in Deep River. And in terms of what those low income folks can afford, basically low income for an individual is about $1,400 a month, a little over $1,800 for a family of 4. And then the extremely low income, which there are several households, as we pointed out on the previous slide, would need incomes of between $550 and $750 a month. And as we saw with in order to be able to live comfortably without spending more than 30% of their income on their housing, without being cost burdened. And as we saw in the rental income slide, or I'm sorry, the average rent slide, the majority of rents in Deep River would be significantly higher than that $550 to $750. And so for particularly low, extremely low and very low incomes, there aren't that many rental housing opportunities in Deep River for that population. And then when you look at home buyers or home owners, your low income is $214,000 for an individual to $285,000 for a family of 4 at low income, all the way down to $86,000 to $121,000 for an extremely low income. And again, we saw that the median incomes in Deep River, the median home prices were between $300,000 and $400,000. So even basically at the median, you have a significant number of homeowner situations where people are not able to afford to either buy or to maintain their homes in Deep River. And so what that means is that they are cost burdened. And so these charts show you cost burden for renters, cost burden for homeowners. And you basically have 2/3 of homeowners, of low-income homeowners, and 3/4 of low-income renters are spending currently more than 30% of their incomes on their housing, which means they are at risk if there is a medical emergency, or if education expenses go up, or the cost of gas goes up. Those items cut away at property owners and renters' ability to kind of stay above water. And there just are not enough opportunities to restrict, or there aren't enough supply at restricted levels that would allow people to live comfortably, not spending more than 30% of their incomes on housing. So the interesting thing here is on the top chart, which shows you the portion of income spent on housing, both renter occupied and owner occupied. And in a reversal of a lot of towns that we've seen, only about 9% of the total renters in Deep River are cost burden, which is the red bar. But a full 30% of owners are cost burdened. And I think this also goes back to your small households, aging population in big houses, where people are basically struggling with houses that are too big and too expensive for them. And this is something in a lot of towns that we've analyzed. It's somewhat the opposite, where renters are struggling a little bit more than homeowners. But I think the demographic and housing type combination in Deep River really creates that condition where your owners are struggling a little bit more than your renters. And as you look at the bottom bar, that plays out because, you know, of seniors 65 and older, over a third, 37.5%, are cost burdened. So currently, excuse me, as we talked about earlier, that the state sets a 10% benchmark for being subject to the Affordable Housing Appeals Act. As of 2020, Deep River had 64 protected units. A number of them were ownership situations were CHFA and USDA mortgages. So a number of them, 20%, were government assisted, which tends to be senior and disabled housing. There were a few tenant rental assistance, which is basically Section 8 vouchers. And then there were actually very, very few, I think, deed restricted units. 0% deed restricted. So that means that the town, even though the Affordable Housing Appeals Act, 830G, has been in effect for over 30 years, the Deep River has not been affected by that appeals process. And so you add that all up, and Deep River, as about 3% of its housing stock, is restricted and available at affordable levels. So what does this mean in terms of the numbers? We went through I should say SLR, went through a housing gap analysis, which basically compares the incomes of existing residences with existing rents and housing values, and did a calculation of the number of units that were affordable to low-income households based on HUD income limits. And so the gap itself compares the demand, basically the need, to the current supply. And the representative cases are for a family of 4 and single person. And so those two, as we talked about in earlier slides, have different income limits. So this is owner occupied units, and renter occupied units is, again, this is for the family of 4. For owner occupied units, the gap is not as significant as it is for renter occupied. The renter occupied, the red numbers there indicate that there are over, my math is right there, over 450 renter occupied units that are unavailable, that are needed in Deep River for low, very low, and extremely low income. But for individuals, interestingly, that is somewhat flipped, where the individual renter occupied units are relatively, the supply and demand is relatively aligned. For owner occupied individual units, which is to say smaller houses, the gap is significant. You have a gap of over 650 units for individuals. So a couple of takeaways from that. Again, there are a significant number, over a third of the town's population in terms of households would be eligible for affordable housing. A number of them are, a significant percentage are cost burdened, particularly owners and seniors. And the biggest gaps are for families to rent and for individuals to purchase. Okay. Liz, you want to take over at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks for teeing all of that information up. So just a reminder, have that second browser window open, have your smartphone next to you. and type in pollev.com/SLR 2021. And that will take you to our polling software. You should see this test question pop up about your favorite flavor of ice cream. And go ahead and answer that when you see it. Mint chocolate chip taking an early lead. If you're having, thank you, Megan, for putting that in the chat. If you're having any issues connecting, let us know. Either use the raise hand function or type in the chat. Again, that's pollev/SLR 2021. All right, we've got about 20 people on the call, so I want to see how many we can get, how many people are still awake. We got 4. They're all picking different stuff. Can we get anybody else?
I think there were 17 people I counted outside of us.
Okay. All right. So we've got 7. That's just about half. Let's see if we can get a couple more. I want to make sure everybody who wants to can participate tonight.
There's got to be at least one person who likes vanilla.
Yeah, what's
I
going
do.
on?
Let me log in. I'll get in there.
All right, we've got 8. Come on, guys. You can do it. There it is. All right, so we're up to 9. And I'm not seeing any questions or people in distress trying to get on. So let's move to some questions. So as John mentioned earlier, there was a regional housing survey that about 90 people participated in, 89 or so. Were you one of them? Or are you new to the process tonight? Okay, we've got a couple new folks, so welcome. All right. Oh, we got up to 10 on this one. Excellent. How old are you? And it's anonymous, so you don't have to fib about it. All right. Okay.
Can we switch it to how old do you look? Then be in good shape.
We've got a lot of black boxes.
What about how old you feel?
That's what I was gonna say.
We don't have 95 plus.
Right?
On this.
Yeah.
You mean tonight or in general?
Oh, all right. Everybody looks great. What kind of household are you currently in? Are you living alone? Are you sharing your space with someone? All right, unsurprising. We're seeing a lot of single and 2 adult households, which aligns with that census data. What best describes your current home in Deep River? Right, so far, all owner occupied in a single family. Again, pretty in line with the data we're seeing in the census. All right, I think we're plateauing at 8 on this one. So let's move on. Did you attend a workshop for the regional housing plan? We had one in October and one in January that gave some kind of the zoomed out data about the region. These recordings of, if you missed them, are available on RiverCog's website. If the data tonight excited you, the data in these will make you go crazy. And yeah, since about half of folks didn't get to see it, I recommend taking a look.
And I put the web address in the chat for everyone.
Thanks, Megan. All right. So now let's get into the meat of this, potential strategies for the for the housing plan. John?
Sure. Okay,
introduce
so
us?
we there again, because this is a locally led process, there's all kinds of opportunities for towns to sort of figure out what techniques for increasing housing opportunities are right for Deep River. And so we're going to throw a couple on the hopper and get some of your feedback. So the first is that the town, despite the fact that the town has several, very traditional departments, planning and zoning, board of selectmen, economic development, human service, senior services, things like that. There's no single entity that addresses housing, which is an issue that cuts across a number of those things. And so an idea for addressing housing options over a longer term would be to establish a standing housing committee, which would include members from planning and zoning, from Board of Ed, from senior services, from economic development, that would sort of pool their insight and their resources and kind of keep an eye on how Deep River could increase the housing stock and increase housing opportunity. Now there is a housing authority, but that tends to be basically management of the existing municipal facility, and not necessarily looking at regulations and looking at municipal policies. And so the question is, would you agree that establishing a housing committee focused on expanding housing opportunities is a good idea for Deep River?
Right.
Okay. Well, I think that's at least heartening that
John,
Yeah.
if you don't mind if I interrupt just for a second, it is
course.
my intention that we will put an ad hoc committee at least together to come up with this plan. And if that group wants to, if the community decides that that group should continue, we will continue with that.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. So that's garnering a little more support for the concept, thanks to Angus's explanation there.
Yeah, for the
Okay.
folks who said that they needed more information, do you have specific questions that we could answer right now about that concept? Feel free to type in the chat or unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Katie Russell. I would just wonder how this group would interact in terms of making decisions with the other entities in town government. That's
I
more
think-
information I'd need.
Sure. And so, well, I mean, I suppose in theory, the town could, by ordinance, empower this committee with as little or as much authority as they wanted. But generally speaking, a housing committee is meant to be advisory to the more regulatory entities like planning and zoning, which sets rules, or the Board of Selectmen, which helps to establish ordinances, or Board of Finance, for instance, which would set aside funds for different projects. But yeah, would most community housing committees are basically advisory.
Great, thank you.
And I would concur with that. I don't envision this committee being anything other than advisory. And let our existing regulatory commissions determine regulations.
Thank you, Hank.
Anybody else? All right, let's move to our next one.
So the second concept, as we mentioned when we looked at the zoning, that the only current zone in Deep River that allows for multifamily is the village mixed use zoning district. And that would follow a special permit process and a design review process. And as I noted, that the VMU district is geographically a very small portion of the Main Street area. And not only that, is made up primarily of existing developed properties, existing buildings. So one idea to consider would be to allow for multifamily development, apartments, townhouses, condos, in more zoning districts, and obviously perhaps at lower densities in your R60 and your R80 zoning districts, maybe at slightly higher densities in the R30 and in areas of town where public sewer and water lines are available, and further, where you have basically reuse or redevelopment of an existing building in a place like the Village Mixed Use District, that might be a little bit easier by maybe doing it via site plan review rather than a more extensive public hearing or special exception process. So basically, sort of ratchet down the regulations that would prevent people from developing multifamily at various densities in different parts of town. So that is the concept on the table, and we're asking if you would be supportive. And as you're voting, I would also just note that this is not a binding referendum. The results of this poll do not become town policy. This is just sort of gauging people's interest in different approaches.
If I might add, you're mentioning zoning areas, and I think that not everyone that's privy to this conversation understands what R80 and or any of those other terms represent. So that's not really a good question to ask unless you want to fill in better information on that.
Right, and so that's well stated. I'll also note though that the majority of our audience this evening is planning and zoning commissioners, who hopefully understand decently well. But I do recognize that there is also a lay audience that deserves a more explanation. So thank you.
All right, we have just 7 folks. Get any more or any other comments or questions while we wait? All right, let's move to our last concept.
Okay, and so the third concept is a slightly higher level of complexity, but in the general statutes, there is an enabling statute called 82I, inclusionary zoning, which allows municipalities to put into their regulations a requirement that developments over a certain size require that a number of or a percentage of new housing units would be set aside as affordable. And so similar to what we're talking about this evening with open space, which we require if you're doing a subdivision, the town requires a minimum set aside of open space or a fee in lieu. And so this would be basically the same for affordable housing, where if you were developing, for instance, 10 apartment units or 10 townhouses, that the town could require the developer to set aside a portion of those, somewhere between 10 and 20%, for instance, to be set aside for those households that make less than the area median income. And so it would be a way to sort of piggyback on existing proposed development to encourage more affordable housing in town. And so that would be the concept, and we would be interested in your feedback on that.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this concept?
And the one thing that I would note is, again, that the inclusionary zoning statute does not place into effect strict numerical or percentage targets. So it's not necessarily properties above or developments over 10 units or developments over 20 units, or you must set aside 10% or you must set aside 20%. Those are dials that each municipality would be able to turn based on their development conditions. And so obviously in the case of Deep River and new construction of single family residences, we haven't had any developments over 10 units in many years. So those dials would have to be adjusted to Deep River conditions. However, if multifamily were allowed in more portions of town, we might encourage a significantly higher level of residential development. And so again, thank you for the feedback on this. These are not binding issues, and these are only 3 suggestions. SLR and my team at Tyche have developed lists of a couple of dozen sort of common or potential action steps that a municipality might take that we'll be discussing. And so the next steps from this point forward is that, as Angus noted, he's putting together an ad hoc local committee that we will be meeting with. Myself and RiverCog will be meeting with this local committee to come up with different strategies and prepare the Deep River 830J plan, which will be incorporated into the overall regional plan over the next couple of months, basically March, April, May. We'll provide a draft for public review and public comment in the mid-spring, and then look to adopt, again, the Deep River annex to the regional plan by the beginning of June. And so if people have interest in participating, if you have questions about any of this, I'd encourage you to reach out to Angus or to me, and I have a local email, which is zoning@deepriverct.us. And we'd be happy to continue to engage you in this discussion. And so as we wrap up, we would certainly open it up for questions. We obviously went through a ton of information in a relatively short period of time. But we'd be happy to get any comments or questions about any of that.
So, John, I have a question for you. We touched on, how this is going to be. This is a requirement by the state. What happens if you don't finish this?
So the way the statute is written, that you either, if you don't finish it by the beginning of June, you are required to submit a letter to the Secretary of OPM, Office of Policy and Management, explaining why and what your timeline is for completion. But there really isn't sort of an option for you never have to do anything. Although I will note that unlike the Plan of Conservation and Development timelines, there is not yet the stick or the or else of not being eligible for state discretionary funding and things like that. You have to do it because it's a state law. But as of right now, there's no we'll take away your schools or anything like that. There's no penalty at this point.
Hey, John.
Yes, Jonathan.
Yes, this is sounding like and I don't want to sound negative about the whole idea, but it's beginning to sound like an unfunded mandate.
Well,
is the state gonna have a carrot for us?
For what?
For whatever the cost of organizing.
Well, in this case, this is not. There's no municipal funds going into this. This is being funded by RiverCog, and so the town did not have to contribute financially. So it's actually it's just a mandate. It's been funded through RiverCog, and in terms of paying for action steps, there's no mandate. That to come out of this plan, pledging that the town will spend X millions of dollars on housing, or anything like that. There is no funding requirement for implementation.
This also seems to everything nowadays brushes with each other, but the sustainability movement, in the broad sense of sustainability, you're talking about keeping our communities viable.
Right. And Middlesex County is seeing this acutely. If anyone participated in the regional presentations, Middlesex County is bleeding young people, and a lot of that. I mean, Middlesex County is also its stock in trade is its charm and its quality of life and its beautiful villages and its little downtown areas, and that people would love to move here or to stay here, and it's really a lack of both jobs and housing opportunities that's creating a problem for us. And so it very much is a sustainability problem in terms of our population vitality.
Right. The state of Connecticut is not offering our young people enough opportunities, employment opportunities to keep them interested here in the state of Connecticut. One of my questions that I have is, this is a really big conversation. And tonight there's 21 of us here. most being planning and zoning. How are we getting this information and the input of our community? And how are we going to get people involved?
Right. I mean, that's a good question. And I think what the steering committee that Angus is going to help lead is going to talk about that. And we're using sort of available channels, newsletters, Facebook, email, news, things like that to try to get the word out. And this is, to a certain extent, it's a lead a horse to water type situation. We can make it available. We can certainly do a better job of trying to outreach. But I think in a lot of times, unfortunately, particularly in owner-occupied, occupancy-heavy municipalities, concerns over housing aren't enormous because people sort of own their houses and are more or less fine. Although, as we've seen, people do struggle with cost. That's a long way of saying, we're open to suggestions. We're going to be having public presentations, and we'll do what we can to sort of spread the word. But it's
Yeah, thank you.
it's a
If
challenge. Go ahead, Ed.
I could jump in. We have advertised all of the public meetings that have taken place in the same way that we advertise all of the meetings. And we, we understand that not everybody signs up for the emails and not everybody is on Facebook and all of that kind of thing. But we do what we can to make sure that people are aware of what's. But a couple of things that are in the chat about cost to the town. I don't believe that there's any real expense to us other than what may or may not happen to our grant list. And I anticipate that this kind of thing will help that grow. What this addresses, first and foremost for me anyway, is something that's been happening on the shoreline since I was a young man. I grew up in Old Saybrook and could not afford to stay in Old Saybrook. And this has been happening since the 70s. There are jobs here that jobs come and they go. Our state and our country decided that you couldn't make a living if you didn't go to college. So we lost a lot of tradespeople. That trend is changing, and hopefully that'll continue to change. And there will be folks that are going into out here. I think it's really important to remember that we live in an area is one of the best places in the country, in the world to live. And as a result, it's not as affordable as some other places in the country and the state. But this is an opportunity for us to address that in a way that doesn't cost the town any funds. It doesn't cost the town. And we have a planning and zoning commission that addresses the regulatory part of that. And that happens. We're not going to, I don't think that we should be afraid that we're going to all of a sudden have New Haven in our town. This is something that we're going to see addressed methodically and thoughtfully as to how it best suits Deep River and satisfies the state's requirements as far as how we address affordable housing in communities.
John, one thing to point.
Can you shed a little light on how, and I know it's early days on this, how would recommendations, say from a housing authority, interact with planning and zoning? Would we have to change planning and zoning regulations to enable affordable housing? How would that interplay happen, roughly?
The answer is most probably, because again, I think affordable housing really needs to happen in most cases at a relatively higher density than the town currently allows. And so there may need to be, although except in village mixed use, I believe, and however, sort of the piano works were developed. Obviously, that's not necessarily affordable, but that is a level of multifamily housing. It would most certainly require some tweaks to zoning regulations to encourage this. I would say, yeah, for things like for housing authority expansion, for multifamily expansion, there is, the 830G affordable housing appeals process that does sort of do a bypass of zoning regulations should a developer choose to go that route. But as we noted in Deep River, no developer has gone that route. Yes, generally speaking, to increase density of housing, which is the primary way to increase affordability, there would probably need to be some zoning changes.
If I
I
may,
think it's important, I
just
think it's
to,
important to remember, I'm sorry, it's important to remember what John said early on. We don't need to do a whole heck of a lot right now. The state is not mandating numbers. They're not mandating a whole heck of a lot for us to adopt a plan. We don't have to say, okay, 35% of our housing is going to be affordable or anything. We need to address the situation. And that's really where I think we should do. We should do this methodically. We should do this. The first thing is to satisfy the mandate. The second thing is to take a longer range plan as to how we can address the situation that our citizens that our citizens are in fact suffering from, or not, maybe not suffering from, but we looked at this survey and we see some issues. We can address that, but we don't need all kinds of regulations in these next 3 months. We need to satisfy the requirements, which are very, very vague. We can do that, and we can have a continuing conversation about this. This isn't something that we're going to jam down everybody because we need to do it right away. This is going to be a very slow and a methodical process.
And it's also important to point out that it's a 5-year plan. We're not going to solve Deep River's issues in 5 years. This is the first step in a multi-decade process, I think, to change sort of the broad direction of our housing stock.
yeah, and I just want to jump in here because I think we're having some parallel conversations. Those who are speaking and those who are interacting in the chat. So I just wanted to bring in some of Julia's comments about grants for the development of housing. And I wanted to tie that to our conversation about zoning, that while there are funding opportunities and things like that, zoning is a way to provide relief through zoning reform and change. That's something that we saw that Deep River did tonight with the ADU regulation. So without spending any money, they're now allowing for smaller units that may be more affordable to folks to be built. And while they're not guaranteed affordable, that change, that tweak opens up the market a little bit more and takes that longer term view that Angus was mentioning. So that's my piece on that. And I hope that answered Julia's questions as well.
Hey, John.
Yes,
this is I'm getting the sense of what a broad topic this is going to be, because you're talking about the main street. I mean, the whole livelihood of the town. You're talking about staffing our first responders, a lot of whom are tradespeople. It's fascinating, and it's going to be pretty exciting.
I'm glad you think so. I agree.
Right. You know, I agree with that, Jonathan. I don't like mandates from the state at all. I think they're way too broad brush, but this gives us a lot of latitude And it's something that that should be addressed in Middlesex County, not just in Deep River. Deep River, as the survey points out, Deep River is unique in our affordable concerns as opposed to the rest of our neighboring communities. But this is going to be it'll be a good thing for us. Let's just take our time. Let's do a good job at it.
I agree. I think John nailed this when he said, you know, it's not going to happen overnight, but this is a great starting point. You know, I think we're on the right track.
Just to clarify on that second, so if a developer went in and they were gonna build 10 houses and it put 10% has to be affordable housing. If they built $400,000 houses and then they put an affordable housing, that's not gonna be a $400,000 house. That's gonna be kind of discriminatory, isn't it?
Well, I think the like 830G, which is the Affordable Housing Appeal Statute, any inclusionary regulation, I would hope we would include that the affordable unit has to be built substantially similar to the market rate units. So you wouldn't build, 9 McMansions and 1 hovel.
Exactly.
So that would be incorporated into the regulation. And it's that way.
And that was a great question.
And typically the income from the market rate units can offset the cost of the affordable units as well. So it usually works better with more units.
All right.
Okay. All right. This is your meeting, Tony.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I was going to ask if there are any more questions. If not, I was going to, move on from this and get back to the regular part of the meeting.
So again, thank you to RiverCog for funding this, and to Liz and SLR for helping to put together all the information, and certainly for Angus for carrying the ball forward. So this is the beginning of the discussion. We'll continue this through the spring.
And thank you for all the people who did participate. All right. So anyway, moving on to old business. Item A, plan a conservation development discussion. John, do you want to recap or?
Well, so we did have sort of an informal ad hoc gathering a week and a half ago now, and established some broad concepts that Steve and I will be compiling, and we'll be coming back to this commission probably next month with a proposed timeline for updates. In terms of a public process and a timeline for updating the plan of conservation and development, which will take place basically over the next year and a half or so.
Fantastic. All right.
John, a lot of those slides that you showed tonight were really very interesting. I was trying to kind of write, some of the statistics down, but I'm not fast enough.
This will be available on the RiverCog website.
Okay.
We'll send it along. And
because
after
that really involves the plan of conservation and development. I mean, it's a part of it. So it would be good to have those.
Yep, we'll do. And I'll make sure we change East Hampton to Deep River on that one slide.
If you can, John, provide it to us. We can put it on the town website too.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anybody else plan of conservation development? If not, gonna move along to reports. All right, John, you're back up with the ZEO.
Well, I'll note, one of the questions early on in the meeting was about 400 Commercial Drive. We've been trying to run that to ground, trying to figure out the exact regulatory status of it, and what they're doing there. And again, they have claimed in both writing and on the phone that they are completely in compliance with their existing permitting, but I think there is enough smoke out there to believe that they may be expanding their use beyond what their permits allowed. So Steve and I are running that to ground. And then I would also note, and obviously there was a lot of conversation with Mr. Prisley over the last month. and with the attorney concerning the history of that property. And then beyond that, for folks who have not had the opportunity to meet him yet in person, and he participated this evening, but Steve Natick has joined Tyke Planning and Policy Group and is splitting zoning enforcement duties with me. And so some months Steve will be participating in this meeting, some months I will, some months both of us. But we're both available via the same email, zoning@deepriverct.us.
Let's see, moving on to the attorney. I don't think we have anything except for that letter that came in, unless you guys say otherwise.
Nope, that's it.
All right. Engineering, anything?
Nope.
And Chairman, the only thing I was going to add was ask if anyone was going to volunteer for Angus's ad hoc committee. If not, I will do it. Crickets, huh? Thanks, guys. All right. On to budget. I don't think we have anything in front of us. I know the budget talk is going to come up soon, so I think we'll just leave that as is for the moment. Payment of bills. I haven't seen anything. Nancy, you have anything? Or John?
I don't believe we had any bills coming.
Fantastic. Moving on to adjournment. Looking for a motion.
I'll make the motion, Stan.
Thank you, Stan. Look for a second.
I'll second to prove I'm awake.
All right. I don't think we need a roll call vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, guys. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tony and John did a good job.
See you guys.